Chapter 3. To run or not to run? The next morning before school, I went with my mother to get some free bread. We waited in a bread line with others. For many people without jobs or with little money, it was the only way they could afford bread. And it was the same for us. Remember, this is the time of the Depression. So most people don't have jobs. Most people don't have income. And they were blaming this all on the president of the United States at the time. After that, I walked to school with my buddies, Nikki and Boris. Nikki and I had been friends since we were babies because our mothers were friends. His grandparents came here from Italy a long time ago, and all the girls had a crush on Nikki because of his wavy black hair, his brown puppy dog eyes. Nikki was the best stickball player among us, but he also loved drawing and making things with his hands. Before I got polio, I loved stickball too. We met Boris 5 years ago when his family moved into the neighborhood after leaving Russia. They had escaped something called religious persecution, where people were attacked simply for being Jewish. It was kind of like Wally bullying me because of my legs, only much worse. When Nikki and I met Boris at school, we loved his sense of humor and we all became friends. Every day, Nikki and I met Boris in front of his parents' grocery store. He was waiting for us on the top of a horse-drawn wagon full of food that was being unloaded. Once we got to school, I saw a big sign in the hallway that said, "Run for student government." I was looking at the sign, remembering how I wanted to run for student government before I got polio. Just then, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Beverly. "Hi, Tommy," she said. She was wearing a sunny yellow dress with a matching ribbon in her hair. "You thinking of running for student government?" No, I said as I turned back to the sign, pretending I hadn't been looking at it. "Well, the elections are coming up. Speaking of which, I saw you at the rally for FDR yesterday. You left so quickly I didn't get to say hello." I was late for an appointment," I said. "Oh, yeah. How's your physical therapy going?" "Just great," I said. "I don't plan on having these things for much longer," I fibbed, waving one crutch in the air as I leaned on the other for support. "You're so brave, Tommy." Brave, I thought to myself. How am I brave? "And I think you're going to be just fine. You know, you really should run for student government. You'd be great at it." I knew a little bit about student government. The members organized school events like dances and fundraisers. They also created the clubs like the chess club and math club. You could be president, vice president, treasurer, or secretary. It was a lot like the real government, which I've been interested in ever since we learned about the American Revolution and the founding of the United States in history class. I really hadn't given it much thought, I fibbed again. "Well, maybe you should." "See you later, Tommy," she said as she walked off. As I watched her go down the hall, I felt butterflies in my stomach, and I couldn't stop thinking about her smile. I went over the drinking fountain to get some water. Just as I started to feel the cold water on my lips, someone pushed my head into the fountain. My face was covered with water as I turned around to see Wally standing there. "Hey, polio legs," he said. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I just couldn't believe it. Some kids were laughing at me, which made me embarrassed. I could feel my face turning red, but I'm not sure if it was of embarrassment or anger boiling inside me. If I didn't need these stupid crutches, I'd stand on my own. I would have punched Wally right in the face. But I wouldn't do that, and that made me just as angry as Wally's bullying. At dinner that night, my parents talked about the upcoming presidential election. According to Pop, FDR had better ideas for getting the country out of the Depression than Hoover did. "How's dinner, boys?" Mom asked. "Dinner's delicious, sweetheart," Dad said. Dad had lost his job as a bookkeeper and now only worked here and there doing odd jobs. He was frustrated about not having money, but he tried not to let it show. Dinner was ham, potatoes, and dandelion salad. It tasted fine, but sometimes lately I didn't have much of an appetite. "Not hungry?" Thomas' Ma said. "Nah, tastes good though. Hope you're not coming down with something," she said as she placed her hand on my forehead. "No, I'm fine. I'm just not hungry," I said. "Okay," she said, sounding a little bit concerned. "By the way, I sewed up that hole in your pants. They're good as new." "Thanks, Mom," I said. "Sorry that I tore a hole in them." Pop showed me an article in the newspaper about FDR coming to give a couple of speeches in New York. "Would you like to go?" he asked. "Sure, Pop," I said, but I didn't really care one way or the other. "Can I be excused?" "You may, son," Pop said. "I'll put your dinner in the icebox in case you get hungry later," Mom said. As I got up from the table, I saw Mom and Pop exchanging a look. I could tell they were worried about me. They call it icebox and we call it a refrigerator and a freezer. Do you know why they call it an icebox back then? In my room, I sat on my bed trying to decide if I should run for student government. I thought about Beverly and how I liked talking to her at school today. I sat up and looked out my bedroom window. Then I saw that broken down Model T sitting there all alone. It reminded me of how sad and lonely and helpless I felt. A few days later, I was coming back from physical therapy when I passed two men talking on the sidewalk. One of them pointed at me and said, "Do you really want that for president?" I turned and looked at him. He had an angry look on his face under his wool cap. His hands were rough and dirty. "What do you mean by that, mister?" I asked. His friend smiled at me and gave him a playful shove. "Yeah, what do you mean by that, you dumb palooka?" "Me?" I asked in surprise. "Yes, you, sir. I've heard my share of insults, but I don't even understand this one," I said. "Oh, I'm really sorry, kid. I didn't think you could hear me. I wasn't making fun of you. Really, I wasn't." "So what do you mean?" I asked again. "I was talking about Roosevelt. There's a lot of people out of work, but what does he care? He's a rich guy. We've all heard those promises before. We need a president who will get people back to work." "Aw, you don't need your whole sob story, Paulie," said the other guy, whose name turned out to be Ralph. "You're just lucky the kid didn't take his crutch and give you a nice whack in the shin for having a big mouth." Ralph smiled at me and kicked Paulie in the shin. "Hey, cut it out," Paulie grumbled. "I'm in a bad mood with all this election stuff. I'm out of work, and I just don't think Roosevelt is the right guy for the job." "Sorry for my loud mouth, kid. But what does that have to do with me?" I asked, again, still confused. "Why did you point to me and say, 'Do you want that for president?'" "Oh, because Roosevelt has polio." "Huh?" I said, puzzled by what I was hearing. "Yeah, just like you. He gets around on crutches. He even uses a wheelchair sometimes." "FDR had polio?" I couldn't believe it. "Oh yeah, got it about 10 years ago," Ralph explained. "And as far as I'm concerned, he's a better man for having it. So don't let it stop you, kid." But I was no longer listening to Paulie or Ralph. FDR had polio, I thought to myself as I started home. Wow, and he's running for president. How's he doing that? This was interesting. Very interesting indeed. "Sure, FDR had polio," Pop said. "We had just sat down for dinner." "Do people know?" I asked. "Sure they do. They just don't make a big deal about it," Mom said. "Because it isn't a big deal," Pop added. "Listen, FDR might have had polio, but he's not going to let it stop him from doing anything." "But people don't mind?" "Nope," said Pop. "That man on the street minded." "There's always going to be someone who thinks silly things," Pop said. "Do you think he's embarrassed about it?" "No. I'm sure there are moments when he feels awkward, but not often enough to stop him. In fact, FDR went to the Democratic National Convention in person to accept his nomination for president. No one else has ever done that before, so clearly he has nothing to hide." "Wow, this is incredible news. Most people just don't make a big deal out of it," Mom chimed in. "And you know why, dear?" "Why?" I asked. "Because FDR doesn't make a big deal out of it," Mom answered. "Because it's not a big deal," Pop chimed in. Roosevelt had polio, I thought to myself, and he might become president. I had my doubts about whether or not it was a big deal to Roosevelt or if he felt embarrassed, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so sorry for myself. In fact, I was pretty excited. So question for you before we get further in the book. Did Roosevelt become president? I think you guys already know the answer to that one. Crack! The ball shot off my bat and went sailing over a Model T. The ball soared over a tree, bounced off the ground, and rolled down the sidewalk. Kids chased after it as I ran to the fire hydrant that was first base. "Go, Tommy, go!" they screamed. Faster and faster I sprinted. As I ran, I saw a bright light. I woke to the sun shining in through my window. It was early on Saturday morning. I got dressed and went outside to find Nicky. "Nicky, did you know that FDR had polio?" I said as I approached him sitting on the stoop of his apartment. He was whittling on a piece of wood with a knife. "No," he said. "I didn't know that." "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the wood. "Oh, this is the Statue of Liberty. It looked like a stick of butter with a smiling face scratched into it." "So, can you believe FDR had polio?" "Wow," said Nicky. "And he's going to be president." "At least, that's what my ma says." "I know," I said, hardly able to contain my excitement. "I know." After talking about FDR with Nicky, I realized that I really wanted to be in student government, and I'd be good at it too. I thought I liked working with people, and I wanted to do good things for our school, so why shouldn't I run? I mean, if FDR can run for president with polio, why couldn't I be on the student council with braces on my legs? I was excited to do it before I got sick, so why let polio stop me now? Monday was the last day to sign up, so come Monday morning, that's exactly what I would do. At school Monday morning, I saw Beverly in the hall. "Hi, Beverly," I said. "I wanted to let you know that I've decided to run for student government." "That's great, Tommy," she said with a smile. "I told you you'd be great, and of course I'll vote for you. I'll even help you write your speech if you want." "Speech? What speech?" "You know, you're going to have to give a speech. We can talk about that later. I have to get to class," Beverly said. I just stood there stunned as she walked away. How could I not know that I have to give a speech? I felt sick to my stomach just thinking about speaking in front of a bunch of people. What had I gotten myself into? Man, it's hard to talk in front of people, even if you're doing it on a camera reading a book. How do you think he feels? I bet you know that one too. "Who will I have to give the speech to?" I asked Boris and Nikki. It was lunchtime, but I couldn't eat. I was so nervous just thinking about giving a speech that I felt like I had a big rock in my stomach. "A lot of people. The whole school, I think," Boris said as he took a bite of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "The whole entire school?" I asked. I was starting to panic. "Don't you remember listening to the speeches last year?" Nikki said. "I guess I must have missed school that day," I replied. "Don't worry, you'll be great," Boris said as he took another bite of his sandwich. Would I be great? I thought to myself. Again, in italics. Sure, why not? What's the worst that could happen? I'd have to stand on the stage in front of everyone, and the kids might laugh at the braces in my crutches. That seemed pretty bad. "Don't worry about your crutches," Nikki said as if he read my mind. "But first, you have to get on the ballot. You should do it now." Okay, I grumbled. I walked across the lunchroom to the student government sign-up table. I could feel beads of sweat forming on my forehead. Not only was I nervous about signing up, I was even nervous about people seeing me sign up. No one's watching, I reassured myself. No one cares. I took a breath and moved towards the table. When I got there, the boy at the table said, "Would you like to sign up for student government?" "I would." "Great, sign here," he said as he handed me a pencil. I started to sign my name, but I was so nervous that I pushed too hard and the pencil tip broke. "Oh, sorry. Do you have another pencil?" I asked. He chuckled and said, "Sure," as he handed me the pencil from behind his ear. "Sign here, then take this paper and get 50 signatures. Once you get 50 signatures, you'll be placed on the ballot." 50? I stammered. "Yep, 50. But don't worry, it's not as hard as it sounds." "Okay, if you say so," I mumbled. As I turned to walk back to Nikki and Boris, I passed a group of guys from the chess club. They stood up and clapped and shouted, "Well done, Tommy. Good for you." So much for nobody noticing me. Now everybody stopped to take a look, and more people started cheering, which brought more attention to me. I could feel the warm sensation come over me as my face turned beet red. I wanted to run away, but that was impossible. And then I saw Beverly smile at me. Before I knew it, nearly everyone in the lunchroom was clapping and cheering me on. And then I did something unexpected. I did it, but it was like I was watching myself do it. I raised my right arm up, crutch and all, and then swooped it across my body and took a bow. Well, that seemed like a pretty good time to start getting signatures, so I headed over to the chess club. Guys, the 6 of them were my first signatures, my very first supporters.